Well, hello there, everybody. I am ODAT Nerd. You may be familiar with me if you have ever visited the Sublime Text forum, Stack Overflow, the unofficial Discord, the unofficial IRC channel for Sublime Text. I'm usually around answering questions and providing unofficial support for Sublime Text. And I am launching a channel here on YouTube wherein I want to create a complete soup to nuts course on package development in Sublime Text. And of course, such a course takes a while to create. You want to get it just right. You don't just want to go off the cuff, but that takes a long time. And well, perhaps we might need a little practice and actually get some other content onto the channel. So for the purposes of testing, and if you are watching this, I'm probably happy with the results of said testing. Let's do some live plugin coding. Now, this is completely done without a safety net. I'm not doing any editing whatsoever after the fact, so you get to see the entire process of plugin creation from beginning to end. Terrible, idiotic mistakes and typing notwithstanding. So, what do you say we get rolling on that? All right, so here we are in Sublime. And for our purposes, this example is going to come from a question that was recently asked on Stack Overflow. My tab went away. See, look, it's already going wrong. It went on the wrong monitor. So this is the question that this user asked. They have a file in this particular format and they use this as sort of a notepad, and they want to be able to do something like select tag 2 and have the paragraphs for tag 2 jump to the top of the document, such as this here. Now we can see those two are at the top, and what are the ways to do that? And he wants to do this in Sublime, not in a command line method. And I'm also going to point out that um, he specified in the comments on the question that he wanted to modify the file and not necessarily do something like just folding. So how could we go about something like that? Now, just to get started, let's say we want to create an actual file to work with. And we'll just grab 5 things here and we'll say this is what, oh, they were hashtags, weren't they? Hashtag tag 1, hashtag tag 3. And this one's hashtag tag 2, hashtag tag 4. Just throwing some random stuff in here. Hashtag tag 5, hashtag foo tag. Let's double check that tag 1 extended. There's a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. Let's throw a tag 4 on this one, and we'll call this one last underscore tag. And let's just go ahead and save that in my home directory, and we'll call it sample.notes, let's say. Now, the first thing to note is this is particularly not nice to look at. So what if we were to do something like create a syntax for the file just so that it's easier to look at? That seems like a good idea. That would be fairly simplistic. So what we could do is say what, new syntax. That's going to give us stub. Now the extension of the file we created is notes. Now let's say this is just plain text, so say text.plain.notes, just to differentiate it from regular um, plain text files if we so cared. And let's say we really all we want to do is highlight those tags and make them something that we want to see. So we can go ahead and get rid of everything. And so for the first thing we want to be able to do is match a tag. And now it's important to note that for the purposes of this plugin, we are assuming that the sample files, the text files, look like they look here in our right-hand pane. That is, there is a single line that contains one or more tags, and following that is one or more paragraphs that associate with that tag line, if you will. And then there can be another line. So we're not going to try and capture tags that appear inside of a paragraph. And when we grab a paragraph and shift it, or a tag section and shift it, we're going to pull the line that contains all of the tags and all of the text after it up to, but not including the next tag line. Those are important distinctions to make in the code that we're going to create. So the first thing we were going to say in that case is the regular expression for matching a tag has to start at the beginning of the line. And there can be any amount of white space. We don't care what that white space is. And then there will be a hashtag and one or more word characters. And we'll say that just for the purposes of being able to distinguish them and also use other features, we're just going to say entity.name. Well, let's say tag. What the heck? And delete that. As soon as I push the save button, we're going to have to save this. We'll call it notes. Now, this is going into just the standard user package, of course. Now, nothing happens there naturally. But if we were to jump over to here and close that file and reopen it, now the first tag on every line, even if there are spaces, like so, is what we expect to see, but there are more tags there, aren't they? And also, let's modify this just to point out. If I do this, we can see this is text plain notes and entity name tag. And if I put a bunch of spaces in here, this part is entity name tag 2, even though it's not actually part of the tag. And why? Because this whole match is being scoped as entity name tag. That's not really what we want. So let's say we want captures, and the first capture in the thing will be the entity name tag. And this part can go away. And then up here, wrap that in characters, save, and immediately we can see that that has done what we wanted. Now that part's not a tag, but this part is. That's good. So let's go back to that part there. And now we want to be able to capture the other tags on the file, on the line as well, right? How would we do that? Well, what we want to do is push into a new context. And in this context, we have a new match. And here we can match just a tag, which is the hashtag and word, one or more word characters. And here the scope can actually be entity name tag, and we don't need to do any captures because that's all we're matching. And let's say that also inside this, if we were to match the end of the line, we would return out. And just like that, all of the tags are tagged. Now, I am by no means a Sublime Text syntax expert. I leave all of that to the syntax king, Keith Hall, my cohort in arms, if you will, part of the stealthy and hasty Sublime Text Ninja team. But just as a 10,000 foot overview, in Sublime Text, the syntaxes are matched one line at a time, and they are matched left to right within that line. So if there's more than one match, then the one closest to the left of the line that hasn't already been consumed is the match that wins, which doesn't matter for us here. And also there can be sets of rules called contexts. There's always a context named main, which as we can see on line 8 is where it starts. And this is telling us that there is exactly one rule in the main context, and that rule is if a line starts with a tag, then label it as a tag and push onto the context stack a new anonymous context that provides a new set of rules, and those rules are the only ones in effect in this case until we return back to main. And the only two rules are if you see a tag, tag it as an appropriate thing with the scope. And if you see the end of the line, we're done with the tag line. Jump back up to main, if you will. Pop to a sort of like go to main if you were following this as a program. That's neither here nor there, but that is the basis of that. Now, when we look at the file, we can see things a little easier. So we'll be able to go ahead and I lost my focus there, see what is going on with the file. Now, we want to create a new plugin as well for this. So I'm going to use this for that. I added that to my command palette just because it is my way to, I do a lot of plugin type things. I want to create them fairly quickly. Now, this isn't going to be any sort of in-depth tutorial into how Sublime plugins work per se, but it's enough to say that what we want to do is create a new command here that's going to do something, and we'll call it tag to top command because we're taking tags and moving them to the top. We need that command to be a text command because we want to modify the buffer, and only text commands can modify the buffer because only text commands get this edit parameter that's a special edit object that we need to pass to various API functions to modify the buffer. Now, in order to get this to work, let's just think for a second what we want to do. When we run this command, we want to find the paragraph or paragraphs that are attached to a tag, delete them from where they are in the file, and put them at the top of said file. Now, in order to do that, we need to know a tag. What tag are we supposed to operate on? So the easiest way to do that would be to add a parameter to this function called, or this command called tag. Will set the default to none, and that will be the argument that you have to pass the command to tell it what tag to use. And if no tag is provided, then we'll ask the user for one. So let's do that part first. And how exactly would we perform that sort of action? Right, I keep interacting with Windows on the right-hand monitor, and that even seems to scoop the focus away. So my apologies. Now, for the purposes of this, we want to search for tags in the buffer, and we're going to want to use a regular expression for that. And what we actually want to use is a view command or a view API called find all. And let's just go ahead and open help for that so we can look and we can see that find all takes a regex pattern optional flags and returns a list of the non-overlapping regions that match that pattern. And it's important to note it's not mentioned here in the help, but those regions are ordered from the top of the file down because that's just, I guess, the most logical way to pull that off, right? Or at least so it would seem to me. So what we want to pass here to this find all is a regular expression that will match one of those taglines in the file. And let's just go ahead and jump back to that for the time being so we can see what we're looking at. Now, this is going to be very similar to the regex we just used in the syntax. Because this is regular expression, I'm going to add an R there, so this makes this a raw string. And so what did we say? We said we want the start of the line, some amount of white space, followed by a tag, which is this. But there can be more than one such tag on the line. So let's say we group that and say that the text is going to match the start of the line, some amount of white space, followed by a tag, followed by some other amount of, well, let's say optional, non-optional white space. There has to be one in. Actually, you know what? He never specified that, did he? He just provided this, but let's just assume that that works that way. That's something you could potentially look at later. What happens is the hash character part of word characters? Off the top of my head, I would say probably it's not. If we grab all of this and put it in grouping brackets 2, then we can say there has to be one or more of them. So now the entire regex matches the start of the line followed by some sort of optional white space and then a group of one or more tags separated by optional white space. And what that's going to return is a list, right? So um, that list is going to contain the list of all regions in the file that match this regular expression, which in this case is lines 1, 7, 13, 19, and 25 in the file as the only lines that start with some number of tags. So let's say we call that tag lines is equal to that. And just for our purposes, we will print tag lines. And this is going to be the very first save. So what did we call this? Tag to top. Just to keep it so we know what it is. And if I was to check, that seems to have worked. This console is perhaps a titch tall for what we're doing. So let's squinch that down somewhat like so. And say view.run command. And the command to run is tag to top. And when I hit enter, we get an empty list. And why? Because the file that's currently focused is this one. It has no tags in it. So let's go ahead and jump over to there and try it again with the actual file noted. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if you're not familiar with the Sublime API, regions represent character offsets in the file and they go from an offset to an offset. So 0, 12 starts at offset 0 and ends at offset 12, and that's going to represent line 1. And then the next one is going to be line 7, and so on, and so on, and so on, until it gets to line 25, which is quite far down because these lorem tags are somewhat big. So we know we are grabbing the appropriate tags out of this particular file. But what we actually need to do is this is just getting us the regions that represent the tag lines themselves. We actually want the tags themselves. So for example, this first region 0 to 12 is line 1. It's going to contain the entire text tag 1 space tag 3. We actually want those two tags to be separate. And how would we do that? Well, that is also fairly simplistic. We have an array or a list in, I guess, Python parlance of all of the regions that represent tags. So we're going to need some structure to actually hold the tags that we gather. And let's say that because tags might overlap, we don't want it to be a list. We want it to be a set. So we would say tags equals set. Thusly, now we can say for region in tag lines, that is going to iterate over all the regions, and we can use line equals self.view.subster region. And if you are not familiar with that method, that very simply returns the character to the right of the point, and this one is actually pointing at this one here, which returns the contents of the region as a string because what we are passing is a region, right? Oops. So that's going to grab the line out of the buffer. Now within that line, we need to, again, grab all of the tags that we see there. And how would we do that? That is just a standard Python regular expression item. So what we're actually going to need to do is import the RE module up here, and here we can say re.findAll, and this works similar to up there. We want to find something that matches a tag, right, which is a hash, a word character, one or more, and we're going to find all of the items in the line. Now, just for our purposes, again, to make this easier, let's print that, switch over to this, and run the command again. And we can see it's finding the tags that we actually want it to find. So that is absolutely perfect. So let's jump back over here. And actually, we don't want to print this. We want to add them to the set. So we can say tags.update instead and update the list of tags. Now, there's a couple of things to note here. And one is maybe there aren't any tags in the file. What would we do in that case? There's not a lot you can do, just nothing for it to work on. You should probably communicate that to the user in some way. One way to do that would be to pop a dialog box up in the less obnoxious way, perhaps, depending on your point of view. It's the view I happen to have, is that we could display a message in the status line. So we could easily come down here and say, if not tags, and then we could say sublime status message, and then this file contains no tags, and save that. And just as a test, we can even do that here, and they're going to have to watch the status line here when I do this. This file contains no tags. No, it doesn't. But if we were to jump over to the file on the right in the sample notes file, we don't see a message because it is in fact grabbing tags. Now, also probably important to point out that coming to the console to do this all the time is a giant pain in the rump as well. So here's something I like to do. I would say preferences, key bindings, and we would add a key binding here, and the key would be, let's say, super plus T. That's what I normally use, and the command is tag to top. And now I can just open the console and hit the command, and that file contains no tags, and this file is doing that. So that's what we want. Now, the other thing to note is this is code that is actually finding the tags, but that's not really what we want here. This run method is actually getting a tag passed to it. So we really only want to do this code that we have here to find the tags and prompt the user for one if there isn't one provided to us. So what we should actually be doing here is boosting this code, pulling this code out into something else. And one way we could do that would be to add a method in the command. But for our purposes here, just briefly, I'm going to def find tags, and it's going to take view. And then we're going to pull those lines to there. We should probably unindent them somewhat, I would imagine. Everywhere we see self.view, we don't need the self because it was actually provided. And here we can return the tags. Now, actually, let's go even further and say that not only do we want to return the tags, we want to return the tags being sorted. And in order for that to work, we need to return a list. Now, we can come down here and say, if tag is none, then we can invoke some method. So let's say return self.prompt tag. And we'll just say print the tag selected was that. We'll use this cheater method. Now we need to define a method to do that. So the method is called prompt tag. And what does this method actually need to do in order to prompt us for a tag? And what this actually wants to do, well, first thing we're going to need to do is grab the list of tags. We're going to use a quick panel for this. If you're not familiar with that, you will be in just a moment. So we're going to find the tags in self.view. Just for our own edification, let's go ahead and print items just so that we know what we're doing so far works. That seems to be okay. That's returning an empty list, and that's returning a list of the tags in what appears to be a sorted order, FLT, and those are numbered, so that's good. So this is doing what we want it to do so far. It's successfully finding the tags, sorting them, providing them to this command. Now, there is a command called show quick panel that's going to do what we want. And we can see this is actually a window method. So the first thing to note is this is a text command, so it doesn't have a window. It has a view. It has a self.view. But one of the properties on a view is the ability to capture its window. And by capturing its window, we can do that. And now what we want to pass to the quick panel, the first argument is the items that are going to be provided, and that is the items array. And the next argument is the onDone, which is the something that's called with the index of the selected item. That's something we're gonna have to write. So let's do that first. We'll just inline it here. We'll call it pick, and pick gets an index. And if the index is not equal to -1, spell it right, boob, then we can do something. Now the index will be -1 if, for example, you press escape and close the quick panel. We don't want to do anything in that case. What do we want to do when an item is picked? We want to execute our run method. We can't call it directly from here because self view window show quick panel is going to be the last thing that our command executes. You'll see that it executes that command, returns back to the top of run at line 24, where it returns and leaves this command. But that command quick panel is still open, and this pick function will be invoked. So we need to basically run our command again. And that is very easy to do. We can say self.view.run command. And the command to run is tag to top. And it's going to take a single argument called tag. And the tag that it was selected is the one provided. And now we can come down here and say lambda idx pick IDX. Oh, cannot type. And save. Now let's see what happens again when I do it in the current file. This file contains no tags. If I come over to here and do it, there is a list of tags. Now again, I can push escape, nothing happens. If I open the command again and say tag 2, for example, and hit enter, the console says the tag selected was hash tag 2, which is exactly what we want. So we now have reached a point where our command is getting a tag provided by the user. And if the tag isn't provided by the user, we'll prompt them. We can actually get on doing what it is we want to do. Now, the first thing we're going to need to do is this line here needs to be copied here. And why? Because in order to perform this operation, we need to know the locations of all of the lines that contain tags so that we know what text to move. Now remember, when we move, we're going to grab the line with the tags and everything following it up to but not including the next tag line. That means if someone says they want to move tag 2 to the top, we need lines 7 through 12 to move to the top because line 13 is a new line. Now something, of course, to note here is that once you have the same line twice, you should immediately be wary that this regex is probably wrong in some fashion, just because you've copied it to another location. And the reason for that is now that this regex is in 2 locations, there are better than even odds that it's going to be wrong and you're going to modify it to fix it in one of the places but not the other. So let's say the important thing to do here is say tag line regex is equal to that. And then we can go ahead and replace both instances of this with tagline regex. Still loads. So now when we modify the regex, it's going to modify both of them. Now we're also going to need to grab a tag out, which is that regex right there. So let's go ahead and do that and say tag regex is the text that /w plus. And we'll go down here and replace that with tag regex. And let's just verify that we haven't busted anything by doing that. Open the console. This file contains no tags. We have busted something. What exactly did we bust here? Why does this not have tags? Is our tag regex incorrect? It does not seem to be. Is our tagline regex incorrect? That also does not seem to be, but for some reason in this file contains no tags. Hmm. Let's let's double check this by printing the line as we get to it, because maybe I'm just doing something stupid here. It's not even getting that far. Are we not calling find tags? Sure looks like we are. We're in this sample file. Oh, aha. This is something I have run into before. It's almost like I did that on purpose. And what we'll find is if the cursor is in this file, when I press the key, I get the list of tags. But if I was to press the key to open the console and the key, caret is in the input, when you press the key, this file contains no tags, which is 100% accurate because the command is executing in the input widget in the console. This is an important thing to note. Very important thing to note. If you didn't know, the widget in there is a regular view for the purposes of most things. It's flagged as a widget so that you can distinguish it, but that's the reason why syntax highlighting is allowed in there. So now we are back to down here. So let's quickly move through this list of things that we want to do. We have found the list of all of the tags, the lines that contain tags, and in them we need to do what? We need to define only those regions that have tags that match the tag that we were provided. Now, fortunately for us, we already know how to do that because line 15 has the re.findAll using the tag regex that does that, and that's the reason why we created that variable a second ago. That's going to bother me if I don't fix it. So we can do something very similar to what we're doing in find tags. We can extract all of the lines, but now we don't really care about the text lines. We just need to know if a particular region is one that contains the tag. So for our purposes, let's say we want to create a list of the taglines is a list of all the regions that are taglines, which is again the regions covering lines 1, 7, 13, 19, 25. We need to know of those regions which ones are the ones that actually match the tag that we were provided. And along the way, we also want to try to snag, we want to create a region that spans from that line to the end of the text that's associated with it. So when we see line 1, we want the region that encompasses everything from line 1 all the way to the end of line 6. And then we want another region that counts from line 7 all the way down to the end of line 12, and so on, where line 25, that last item in the list, starts at the line last tag and ends at the end of the buffer. Now, quite simply, that's because when we are finding these matches, we're going to know, for example, that line 13 contains the tag foo tag. And knowing that is important, but we also need to know what text is associated with that line so we can pull it out and drop it somewhere else. Now, realistically speaking, one way to do that would be to enumerate over the tag lines. And we would say for region in tag lines, say. But we actually we need to be able to determine that whole spanning region. And it turns out that this list already has the information that we need. And just for, well, you know what, let's go ahead and comment that out. And just to explain this, I'm going to print tag lines here and go over to this buffer and run the command. And well, I guess I actually have to select a tag, don't I? So I'm going to pick the tag 1, just for example's sake. Go down here. View is not defined. I totally busted stuff. Why? Because I ganked a line. Down here, it's self-view find all. Oh, that's embarrassing. These are the sorts of problems that you have. They're very easy to fix. You just issues. So if I run it, I'm going to pick foo tag this time. It's easier. Now see, we are getting again the list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 regions that specify tag lines. Notice how we know that the first line starts at position 0 and ends at line 12. And the next line with tags, which is line 7, starts at 315. So inherently, we know everything from 0 to 314 is going to encompass that line of tags as well as all of the text that's underneath it. So when we're iterating through the list of tag lines here, we need not only this item, but the item following, so we can pluck that first value out of it. It'll make sense in just a second. So we're going to say index and line in enumerate lines, tag lines. That's going to give us all of the stuff. Now, this is easy enough to say. We can say the end region is going to be tag lines index plus 1. But okay, well, you know what? Let's keep going, and we'll show you what's going on there. You probably have already figured it out. You're a bunch of smart cookies, I'm sure. If tag is in, oops, the region of, excuse me, find all tag regex something, then we can say matched dot append something. There's some bits here missing. We are looking for we need to find all of the tags in a particular line so that we can see if this line of tags matches the tag provided. And we already know how to do that. We saw it on line 15 up there. That's self.view.subster line. What do we want to append? Well, you might already have noted that there is an issue with this code. And the issue is when we get to line 25 in the file, it's the last of 5 things. An index plus 1 is going to throw an error. And the reason it's going to throw an error is because there's not another item following that one. But that's okay because we already know that the thing that follows the last tagline somewhere along the lines is actually the end of the file. So we can create our own end of file variable by creating a region that contains just this number here. Self view size tells you the size of the file in characters or in which is the same as the number of character positions. So self view size tells you basically the character position of the last line in the file. And with that line in place, we know that the end of the line is lines idx plus 1, but only if idx plus 1 is less than the length of the tagline array. Otherwise, it's the end of file value. Now, the something we want to append here is again a region, and this region needs to span the start of the line that contains the tags and the end, and the start of the next section in the file, the next tag line. Now, we know to do that, we're going to need to create a region. Now above on line 31, we created a region with just a single value, and that's a shorthand for the start and end position are both the same value. But here, those values are theoretically at least going to be different. They'll probably be different most of the time. So the start of the region we want to move is line.a. We'll explain that in just a moment. And the end position is, we'll say end.a. And end is going to be either the start of the next line of tags or the end of the file, depending. Now, if you are not familiar with the sublime.region class, we can see that here's the constructor that creates a region with initial values a and b, but most importantly, region.a is the first end of the region and region.b is the second end of the region, which can be a smaller number than a, which is indicative of a selection that goes from the right to the left instead of the left to the right, right? Clear as mud. So let's trace through our code from the top of tag to top command. It's going to get a tag. If one wasn't provided, it's going to go prompt us, and that prompt will eventually call us back. When we get called, we first get a list of all of the regions for lines that contain tags. And once that's done, we go over those and say, does this line contain the tag we were given? And if it does, we want to add something to the array. And the thing we want to add is a region that starts at the position where the line that contains the tags starts and that ends at the start of the next line with tags or the end of the buffer. And with that, we actually have information that we might need. Now, just to visually verify that this is going to work, let's say we said self.view.add regions. And what is add regions? You may be familiar with this particular bit of action. You've probably seen it even if you don't know what it is. And basically it's going to allow us to visually demarcate the section of the file that matches a region. So the first parameter is a key, which is just some unique value that we can associate our regions with. There can only be, this is, think of it as a dictionary key value type situation. The key in the regions dictionary is the tag you provide, and the value is the list of regions, which is the matched array. And then we need to provide a scope, and the scope is going to allow us to visually outline the file. And I happen to know that one of the scopes in the Monakai theme that I'm using that does that is the storage scope. And maybe we also, you know what, let's just call it that. Now let's save, that seems to work. So the idea is, and we'll see if this works, if we select a tag, like for example, tag1 extended, the result of this should be to see a red highlight surrounding the line tag1 extended, line 19, all the way to the end of line 24, but not covering line 25. Let's see what happens. Well, that does not seem to be what we want. It's starting too soon, isn't it? It's starting a little soon for our tastes. And what is the reason for that? Quite simply, The reason for that is this. New line starts is in the /s character escape character set for white space, but we don't want it to be. So the easiest thing to do is change this to that. And that's another good reason why having the regex in a variable is a good idea. Now, if we were to come back over to here, let's try it again and see how much that might fix things. Tag one extended. There we go. Now it is matching the way we want it to match. Where's an example of, did I actually come up with an example of the same tag appearing more than once? Yes, I did. Tag 4. First of all, what if we picked tag 1? That is highlighting what we want. What if we picked tag 4? That's highlighting both of those sections. Now, here's the $1,000,000 case. What if we said last tag? That seems to have worked as well. It didn't go all the way to the end of the buffer, but as you can see, this line is empty. If I added lines and picked last tag, then it would match all of them up to but not including. So this line doesn't have a new line on it yet, so it doesn't match. So this is totally giving us the regions that we are interested in, which is absolutely perfect for our needs. Now, how do we actually shuffle these things around in the file? Well, there are a couple of, let's comment that out for the time being. There are a couple of things that we need here for this. The first thing is that for loop has given us a list of regions. That list could conceivably be empty. So we only want to do something if the list matches. Otherwise, we want to say sublime status message. And let's again do the cheap way. Not found in this file. So what's the point of that? Good user experience. If someone was to just hit the key, like we're doing in our test, they have to pick one of the tags that's in the file and it'll always work. But there's no reason that you have to do that. You could execute this command with any tag you want, in which case maybe it's a tag that doesn't appear in this file. And so we want to be able to give someone, the user, a warning. And we're going to do that the same way as we did up above on lines 18 and 19 by displaying a message. Now, the next, we have, as we can see visually, the list of regions that we want to change. How do we move them to the top? Quite simply via a cut and paste operation, logically speaking. There are some problems with doing this. Now, the first thing to say is that all else being equal, we are going to want to iterate over the list of matched items, right? And in that list of items, we're going to want to do what? Grab the text of this region, delete the contents of this region, and add the text of this region to the start of the file. And logically, that's what we want to do. There are problems with this. The regions that we have are buffer offsets, if you'll remember from looking here in the console. The third list in that array is 639, 655. That means that the third set of tags, which is line 13, That starts at 639 and ends at 655. Actually, the region would be a lot longer, wouldn't it? Because it would go all the way up to 929, because 930 is the start of line 19. If we remove those from the list or from the file, if we delete those lines out, then any of the regions that come after it in the file are now at different file positions than they were originally, which is almost entirely not what you want to have happen, because let's say, for example, what was the tag that appears in the file multiple times? Tag 4. Line 7 and line 19 both match tag 4. Well, if we grab lines 7 through 13 and remove them from the file, then the items at line 19 forward, whose locations we've already calculated, are now no longer at that position. They moved upwards in the file. Now, of course, you could get around that by removing those items, appending the new item to the top of the file, and then keeping track of where it ended so that you know where to insert the next one. But another way to do the same thing would be to press the right sequence of keys and just reverse the order of the iteration. Now that's currently broken, but that's okay for right now. So now we're going from the bottom up. So we would remove lines 19 through 25 and then remove lines 7 through 13, which is good because since we're moving them from the bottom, the offset's changing doesn't matter because the other ones are earlier in the file. So grab the text of this region. We already know how to do that. Self.view.line, sorry, view.subster region. That's going to grab the text of this region. How do we delete the contents of this region? For that, you need to use something called replace. And let's jump to the help for that. Replace replaces the contents of the region with the given string. You could also erase the contents of the region from the buffer using the erase command, but I tend to use replace for this. It's basically just a style choice. The first argument is the edit, which is in the argument list of the run command. The next item is the region to modify, which is literally the word region because that's what we named our variable. And that's the string. And do we want to add this text to the region, this text of this region to the start of the file here? No, actually we want to do it here. We want to delete them all first and then stick them into the file at the end. Now that should be okay. Let us go to here, and just to test, I am going to select tag 1, and we should see tags to the rest of the file still be there, but that first section disappear. And that has worked. Now, we can also test that with last tag, because that's the bottom of the file. Those are gone as well, so that's good. And now for the ultimate test, the ones that interleave, that's tag 4, which should remove the line 7 through 13 and 19 through 25. So we'll see what that does. That has also worked. Now, of course, this code is only 50% done because we're not actually putting any of the text back, but that's okay. The first thing we want to do is capture that text and store it. And since we are planning to grab them out one at a time and then append them all in the end in one operation, the easiest thing to do would be to create a list of items. And then we can say text.append that text. And when we get to this part, what do we want to do? We want to insert this text into the buffer. The first thing we need to do is convert that text back into from a list of strings to a single string. Now I should point out that you can concatenate strings in Python by just, adding them. So, if stir is equal to Bob, then stir is equal to stir plus Jim makes the variable stir contain the text Bob Jim. Also, never use stir as a variable name because, as you can see, it's a special word. Now, there's a problem with that, and I admit I sort of cheated and skipped ahead on that because this is turning into a rather long video, but see that we are going through the file in a bottom-up way, pulling the text out. So if we append the strings together, they're going to be reversed when we do that. And then when we add it to the top, they will have moved to the top, but they won't maintain their order in the file, which is not what the original user wanted. Now, in order to do that, we are thus storing the text in an array or a list so that we can reverse the list when we can add them back to the top of the file. And I will also admit that as an old-timey kind of guy, the idea of successive string concatenations gives me the willies because of reallocations, even though I know absolutely diddly doodle about how smart the Python runtime is with that sort of operation. But we can say dot 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 join, if I can type, to join a list, and the list is of course the text list, but we want to reverse the list. And now that we have a string, how do we add it? There are actually a couple of ways to do that. One way is to use the internal insert command. You could say self.view.run command insert with argument of characters and passes the value of that argument this string. However, it's probably, I'm going to say, easier, better stylistically to say self.view.insert instead, because that uses an edit object, inserts text at a given point, and then takes the string. Now, this is good for two reasons. One, the built-in insert command always inserts text at the current cursor location, so it's extra lines of code for us to change the selection in the buffer to be the top, which also then would require us to capture the selection and save it so we could restore it after we're done. And also, we're already using self-view replace here, so why not just use self-view insert? It's a lot easier. And you can remember from just a second ago, let's open that. The first argument is, again, the edit that was given to the run method. The second one is the point at which to insert, which is just like the endpoints of a region and offset into the buffer. That's easy. It's always 0. And theoretically, this plugin does what we want. So let's boost foo tag to the top of the buffer. There's tag 5 foo tag, and the rest of the items are still there. We can also bring tag 1 to the top. And notice tag 5 foo tag is now underneath it. Now tag 2 and tag 4, tag 2, the two tag 4s are adjacent in the file from 13 to 19, but if I pick them, they should both jump to the top, and then there's tag 1, 3, and tag 5 foo. Now, just for our own edification, let us close that file without saving, reopen it, and try to move tag 4 to the top to make sure that we see the two tag 4s, then the tag 1, tag 3, and the tag 5 foo tag. So we know that it pulled those two out and inserted them in the correct order. And that also seems to have worked. And that is just a quick example of live plugin coding. And by quick, I mean according to OBS, this video is an hour long. I don't know if anyone will ever see this, but you never know. There is a very good reason why people would edit these things and split them out. Also, they probably wouldn't just ramble like a boob. In any case, if you're watching the video, I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to see more of these videos, and keep in mind that it's not just epically long videos like this, but also shorter, more manageable ones, and my course on Sublime Text package development, please feel free to subscribe to the video, click the bell icon if you actually want YouTube to tell you when the video drops. Um, Whenever that is, because I am still working on that. Expect more shorter videos in the interim. And please do like this video, give it a thumbs up if you found it in any way helpful. If you have any questions on anything that happened here, because despite the fact that it's an hour, it was a whirlwind thing, I did not explain a lot. If you have any Sublime Text package development or plugin questions that you've all wanted to know the answer to and you don't know where to look, by all means, drop a message in the comments section below. You can hit me up on Twitter at odatnerd, or as you can see from my desktop, you can also hit me at o.nerd.net for other mail options, or feel free to send me an email at odatnerd@gmail.com as well. That is all I have for today. So thanks for watching and have a sublime day.